car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
This is The Attorneys. I'm Art Franklin. On this episode of The Attorneys, we are addressing a troubling reality that affects students in schools everywhere. We're talking about abuse in schools. I know it's a sensitive subject, but it's a very important one, and we're going to get into it, take a look at the legal ramifications of that. Attorneys at Hollis, Wright, as always, when we start the show, they stand by to take your calls, a free, confidential call. It's 1-844-LAW-TALK. You can reach someone right now as we get into this subject of abuse in schools. Josh Wright is here, and Josh, this is one I'm looking forward to meeting our special guests because this is so important topic for so many people.
Well, absolutely, and you know, the reality is that this is a perfect time to do this show, right? We've never really shied away from issues that are complicated, that are polarizing. We want to bring information to the people, and that's really what we have focused on. And so Greg Yagma and I have been friends for a long period of time, and we're basically the same vintage, although his hair doesn't show it the way that my hair does. But we've both been around the block around the same amount of time, graduated law school about the same amount of time, and he's really an expert in this area. And Greg, first of all, welcome on the show.
Yeah,
so happy to have you on
me.
the show.
Thank y'all.
Good to see you.
How did you get into this area of the law? Because this is not something everybody does.
Sure, it's extremely unique. About 15 years ago, I had a lawyer reach out to me. She was handling a case, a newer lawyer, and got me involved, and I started doing some of the research. And it is very niche because the law is unique when you're dealing with schools and school systems and teachers. And so, you know, I have a 21-year-old daughter who owns my heart, and the thought of something happening to her when she was in elementary school or middle school or high school really got me motivated to dig all the way into this.
This is more prevalent than you think.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I get calls every week. I get emails, you know, off my website at least twice a week about something happened to my child. What can I do about it? You know, and as a parent, that's what you're protective about. That's the most important thing in your world, more than your business or sometimes your health. It's the health of your children.
Tell us a little bit about your practice. I know you do some stuff other than just the school abuse stuff, but just tell us a little bit about your practice. I know you've been practicing over 25 years now, just like me.
Yeah, right at almost 27 years. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, like you, I'm a litigator at heart. I've litigated in 14 different states, tried cases and jury trials in 3 or 4 different states. Do a lot of business litigation, a lot of civil litigation, do a little bit of criminal work because my first job was the prosecutor in the DA's office here. But this niche of school cases is, again, something that's what I call the cause cases that are close to my heart because a lot of times they're uphill battles and sometimes you just got to take a chance and go to war when you're fighting for a child.
Talking about going to war, I want to ask this question of you, Greg. What legal protections, I guess, are actually in place right now to protect students who have been victims of abuse in schools?
Well, you know, in 2018, the governor signed a new law named after, unfortunately, a child that had been bullied and committed suicide. And it puts the onus on these schools to maintain documents and maintain records of kids that are bullied. Now, you know, 6 years later, how effective it's been, the jury's still out. And so, you know, the schools have these protections, and I understand some of it, because the court system doesn't want to get in and tell the school system how to run, or the school would never be effective, and the courts would just be doing that all day and night. So there is a fine line that schools and teachers have legal protections, and trying to get around them when you should be able to can be often difficult. What
is a typical example of how you handle when someone comes in and says, look, we think there's been some level of abuse? How do you sit with that person in the conference room and kind of describe to them, all right, here's the process we're about to go through to evaluate this case? Like, how does that process start?
Sure, and at first I have to turn off my lawyer ears for a minute. I got to be empathetic because, again, they're parents trying to tell something that happened to their child, but then I got to be real with them in the sense of schools have what's called immunity. And just similar to what the police have, it's not like suing Walmart or Target. They have certain protections. It's automatically a teacher's protected from being sued unless some of these exceptions come about. One of the main exceptions is if they violate a mandatory school policy. And that's why I say it's so important to look at the policies and procedures of that particular school district. Yeah. Because if they use their discretion or their judgment, they have immunity, and you're going to get thrown out of court.
Art, it's interesting, and I think Greg put it perfectly. And we see immunity in a lot of different contexts at our law firm, totally different than what we're talking about today. But immunity comes up a lot, whether it's a police officer operating a vehicle or a fireman operating a vehicle, those types of things. And, when individuals are operating a vehicle or doing something that is within their discretion to make their own decision and follow the policy, if you will, of the entity they work for, and there's some discretion in that, they are completely immune. But there are some ways around that, one of which is, I call it the checklist rule, but Greg called it something a little different, but it is if they have a mandatory procedure that they can't violate, that they don't have discretion to violate because they have to follow that. Look at, for example, a standard operating procedure for a police force. They have no discretion to violate that SOP. They have to follow that SOP. If they violate it, there is a way to get around immunity. And the Alabama Supreme Court has carved out one of those circumstances is beyond authority, outside of the checklist, if you will. The Alabama Supreme Court has carved out that, along with some other things that allow you still to bring suit.
So you're hearing many terms like the mandatory checklist and also immunity. What about Title IX? Talk about Title IX, what it is and how it applies.
So Title IX, I think, is so misunderstood by the public and by the school system. Title IX, what do we automatically hear? Boys' baseball field has to be the same as the girls' softball field. Yep. And I've heard school administrators say that under testimony in a case, and that's not even remotely true. Basically, Title IX, that is true that they have to have, equal sort of in the sports context, but outside of it, one of the things that's used to prevent sexual harassment or gender discrimination in any school that receives federal funds, which is almost all of them. Yeah. Even private schools, a lot of them receive federal funds. And so there is a whole process of Title IX. Each school district is supposed to have a Title IX coordinator. And shockingly, at the middle school and the high school level, these Title IX coordinators are just told they're the Title IX coordinator, and they have no idea about it.
No training to understand how that is implicated in their school system.
And I'll give you an example. I had a child that was sexually assaulted adjacent to campus. That's a whole separate issue. It was reported, and so I took the principal's deposition under oath and asked him jokingly, do you know whether Title IX is an Alabama law or is it a federal law? And his testimony was, until this lawsuit, I didn't have any idea. And then they described or identified who the Title IX coordinator was. We went and took their testimony. I said, tell me what you know about Title IX. Boys baseball field, girls softball field. Right. You know anything else? No.
That's interesting. I know we're getting ready to go to break, Art. When we come back, I want Greg to walk us through a little bit about what to do if you feel like your child, as an example, has been sexually harassed or has been abused in some way, and the process that he uses to evaluate these cases.
All right, we're just getting started as we talk about abuse in schools. We got a lot more to get into. Something else I want to remind you about, there's a QR code on your screen. Go ahead, scan that QR code and it will get you in contact with someone at Hollis Wright. There's also a number that you can use to reach Hollis Wright, 1-844-LAW-TALK. You can call whatever you want to ask them. It is a free, confidential call. We've got lots more to talk about as we deal with a very sensitive but very important topic, abuse in schools, here on The Attorneys. We'll take a break. We'll be back shortly.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, Call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
The firm's motto is "Your result matters," and we mean that sincerely. Hollis Wright handles cases every day for those at their lowest point, and will do whatever it takes to get the result you deserve. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys. In this episode of The Attorneys, we are talking about abuse in schools. Throughout this show, we give you useful information that you can use. You may see that scrolling on the bottom of your screen. We want to make sure that you are informed about various topics, but this topic is abuse in schools as we get into that. And Josh, as we were heading to break, we were talking about some things that you want to get into this as we come back.
Yeah, and I think this is important. There's someone sitting on their couch right now watching this show saying, I am intimidated to pick up the phone and contact an attorney about something that I think my son or daughter is going through at school. And I want you just to talk a little bit about, why that shouldn't be their view, that there are people that are out there to help them, like you, and just kind of talk about the process you use to evaluate these cases.
Yeah, so the process, I would tell any parent, if you think something happened to your child, document it in writing to the school. And this is why some of the laws, there's an evolution of them, like we talked about Title IX. It changes with each presidential administration. There was a law that was supposed to go into effect August 1st of this year based on the Biden administration, but it's been enjoined by the federal courts to change some of the things in Title IX and some of the reporting things. And some of them require it to be in writing. So the moment you think something's happened to your child, I can't stress enough to put it in writing to the school, because a school being on notice is one of the big issues that comes about in this case. Sometimes they'll deny that we didn't know anything about it. I don't remember them verbally telling me, because, in a lawsuit, as you know, may go on for years. Sworn testimony may not come out for 2 years, and they can just say, well, I don't remember it.
Right.
But if you have an email that, is incontroverted, it goes a long way. Yeah. And I'll give you an example about that. I had a case one time where it was about a transgender kid. It was not about using the bathroom. The kid was getting beat up in school regularly. Hair ripped off, assaulted in the cafeteria, and we were taking the deposition of the assistant principal. And his testimony, which flipped the whole case, was, I didn't know the kid was transgender. And I was able to pull out 5 emails that he was copied on by the school system that said, we're about to have our first transgender kid here. We need to understand what we need to do. And without that documentation, it would have been a he said, basically at that point. And so it puts the school on notice. And again, your first job is to protect your child, obviously. And the way you do that, and I think the way the schools get put on alert, is when you notify them in writing.
Do you see video a lot? I mean, these schools now have video like crazy. When I walk into schools now, I'm pretty impressed. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. In the past few years, 10 years ago, they said it was cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
And now that's another thing you can do. Put in writing, this is what happened to my child. and I want you to save the video.
Yeah.
Now, there is a big fight over these videos. Even as a lawyer of a family, they say, we're not going to give you a copy. You have to come to our office and watch it because there's federal privacy protections for kids. And so they're saying, we're not going to produce a video that you can have when there's other kids in the video.
Right.
But again, it's crucial in what happens to these children. I have seen an influx, unfortunately, and heartbreaking over the past 2 or 3 years about parents of special needs children who can't talk. You know, whether they're autistic or whether they have some other thing that prevents them. And these videos are invaluable because things you would never think that somebody would do something, a teacher or teacher's aide would do something to a nonverbal child. And I've seen the videos.
So you talk about the videos, you can't get them, they won't give it to you, but if you go in, can you record it while you're watching it?
No, they will not let you. Again, it's called FERPA, which is an acronym for some federal, protection.
Okay.
And even as, like, I represent a family now, and as a lawyer, I said, just send me the video, and they're insistent that I drive, 3 hours away to wherever the school district is to watch the video.
Something else I'd want to talk about, though, I think most people think of sexual abuse in schools when we talk about abuse in schools, but it goes well beyond sexual abuse, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things you see, especially in high school, is sexual harassment. And it's such a topic that, divides on wherever, in this generation. What is sexual harassment? What is not sexual harassment? What is it, boys being boys? I hear that. Or girls being girls, and it's such a fine line. But the federal courts make it extremely difficult to sue, for example, school boards.
Yeah.
They have a different protection than teachers. The law in Alabama is if a teacher violates a mandatory policy, they lose the immunity. If you sue a school board, it is a whole different, what we call a deliberate indifference standard, which essentially means it either has to be intentional or they had so much notice and they didn't either investigate or do something to prevent it, then they may have some liability. But it's like starting a 100-yard dash and you're 30 yards behind.
I know we're getting ready to go to break here, but when we come back, I do want to talk a little bit about school board litigation and whether or not, for example, you have certain code of conduct processes and processes that you can follow for the benefit of your kids to try and resolve issues. So that's one of the things I think we should talk about when we get back.
All right, we'll put a pin on that right there. As we head to break, I want to remind you to follow us, Hollis Wright, on all social media platforms, on X, which used to be called Twitter, of course, on Instagram and Facebook, and follow, like, and subscribe. You get a lot of good information throughout the week. We know you join us on the weekends, but make sure you follow us throughout the week. Also, you'll see numbers at the bottom of your screen. You can use those numbers. One number you can call, 1-844-LAW-TALK. You can reach someone. It's a free and confidential call. You may see some other numbers there. Those numbers you can text to and also reach Hollis Wright. We make it very easy for you to get in contact with Hollis Wright. We're going to take a break. We'll be back as we talk about abuse in schools. Stay with us.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
Did you know when you hire Hollis Wright, you are still in charge of your case? Our attorneys at Hollis Wright are client-centered, allowing you to help us control your case and result. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back. We are glad that you are joining us on The Attorneys. I want to remind you again that this is your last opportunity in this show to reach someone from Hollis Wright. All you have to do is call 1-844-LAW-TALK. Make that call. It is free. it is confidential. You heard our guest, Greg, talk about Title IX. And I just want to go ahead and give him one of these facts here. On factoid here, Title IX, 50 years old, right? But a 2022 poll found that nearly 3/4 of secondary school students and nearly 60% of parents said they know nothing at all about the landmark civil rights law that was meant to ensure gender equity in education, including athletics. So as you were talking about, at the schools, they don't know, parents don't know, a lot of people just don't know about Title IX, and we're talking about immunity. Let's touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in the Title IX context, like we talked about, I mean, the school systems, the colleges are pretty good about it. I mean, I've had a case where a student got accused of something and went down and had a long meeting with the UAB Title IX program, and they were very up to date. They knew exactly what was going on. I think the colleges are more well versed. They have a full staff, for example, and I'm just using UABs. They have a full staff. That's all they deal with, are the Title IX complaints. But the parents, and I understand the kids don't understand, but when the high schools that are supposed to protect these kids don't understand, that's where it becomes problematic. I mean, look, teachers a tough job.
Yep.
I understand that. There's great educators in the state, and they have so many responsibilities, but yet, they're charged with having somebody in that school district that's supposed to educate all the teachers and all the principals.
What do, as far as when we went to break, I want to talk a little bit about if someone has a viable case, how are these cases generally compensated by the teachers and the school board or the administrators and the leaders of that administration? How are those generally compensated?
And that's a great question, because I get asked that a lot. They're worried about suing a teacher in the school system because they have another child coming through the school system, or they like the teacher, and so they don't have to worry. They're not going to bankrupt the teacher. They're not going to bankrupt the school system. They have insurance. Through AEA, is one of the most powerful lobbies in Alabama, through the Alabama Education Association. They provide teachers with this liability insurance. And interestingly, I've been getting more school bus cases, and school bus drivers often are covered by AEA or some other fund that the money comes out of. So if you sue the teacher, the insurance company pays for their lawyer and pays for any settlement or judgment that's not coming out of the teacher's pocket.
Also, when you take these cases, we were talking about this also during the break, you take these cases on contingency. What exactly does that mean for the people at home?
That's correct. I mean, I understand that, parents don't often have a lot of money to spend on litigation, so they're not going to pay me anything. By contingency, I mean, if we win, I take a percentage. If we lose, they pay nothing. And that includes all the expenses I front, and I'm not going to come ask you for it no matter what happens in the end. And so if the concern is I can't afford a lawyer, I hope to put your mind at ease, because that's not, in these kind of cases, in my world, that's not an issue at all.
Yeah. So in contingency cases are very powerful, and it's a very powerful process to allow someone to have the same quality of legal services on the other side of the bar that is paying for a defense firm to represent them. They can do the same thing on the plaintiff and get a really quality lawyer like Greg. I don't know if there are any trends that you see over the last 15 years or things that just consistently keep walking in your door, but is there anything you see that's kind of on the horizon that has consistently been something you've seen over the last several years?
Well, over the last several years, I get so many calls about my child's being bullied by another student. And that is such a difficult situation to go down of whether to hold a school liable or not. The law is not very favorable, and that's why I go back to the stress to document it. And heaven forbid something happened to your child, that's very severe by the same student that's been bullying him or her, then at least you have some sort of trail to prove that the school knew about it and they didn't do anything about it. Yeah. And I think I touched upon it earlier, and again, it's heartbreaking to me, but I've seen more parents calling about, their children are autistic or nonverbal, don't have the ability to fight back for themselves or defend themselves, and whether it's from other students or either teachers' aides is something I see more. They're not, in Alabama, a teacher's aide is not really somebody that's certified like a teacher and goes through that rigor. They're usually, very low paid and low qualifications. For example, I had a kid that was a teacher's aide was playing basketball with a kid that was in 6th grade, and they got in an argument, and the teacher broke his sternum. punched him and broke his sternum because they were arguing about a basketball game, and this kid was in 6th grade.
A little too much competition.
Right. If you get riled up by a 6th grader, you need
Goodness.
to work on your anger and your basketball game.
That's
you
right.
know?
Hey, honest question, honest answer here.
Okay.
Do you think that Alabama still allows for corporal punishment and paddling? I didn't know the answer to this when I was getting ready for this show, and I had to look it up.
I didn't look it up. You threw it on me. I'm going to say yes.
That is correct. Alabama's.
I would have gotten it wrong. I thought that was gone. I thought that was not allowed.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, each school district gets to make their own regulations about it. The bigger ones now have outlawed it. Yeah. Because I think, again, when we were in school, we all got paddled. I hear it from, I got paddled, why can't my kid get paddled? Right. But, as the science has evolved, the medicine has evolved, even, the American Medical Society talks about the negative impact on students on the paddling and the corporal punishment because they are more likely to bully other kids. And you give the discretion to a teacher who's had a bad day to come paddle a kid with the kid can't do anything about it. It gets into a gray area and goes down that road.
How about the person sitting at home right now who has a child in private school and they're wondering whether or not those same amenities you talked about and the same process applies to them? Does that still apply to them? Does the immunity still apply to those with private school kids?
It does not, because the immunity is based on it being an extension of the state or an extension of the government. That a school district is an extension of the government, where a private school is not. And so it is a lot easier to sue a private school on the immunity front. Yeah. Now, they make you sign these contracts, and they have a lot of discretion on what they do, but you do not have to have that battle with immunity with the private schools.
Greg, so much ends up on social media these days. Yeah. What do you say to a parent at home who thinks that their kid has gone through some abuse in school and then they decide, I'm going to post this on social media?
I beg them not to do it. Of course, I can't control what happens, but then it just starts the avalanche. And let's assume you do have a viable case and you get into a lawsuit and you're being deposed or giving sworn testimony, and they start cross-examining you with these Instagram posts or these Facebook posts of you saying all kind of stuff that ended up not being true. I heard this teacher got fired in California for abusing a kid, and it just wasn't true. Right. It hurts your case, and in the end, it hurts your child. Yeah. And there's no benefit to it.
Another thing, too, that comes up a lot, Art, is, Instagram is people's best moment. And they capture their best moments, not their worst moments. And so someone looks like they really don't have any injury. Maybe they're not going through the mental anguish and the process of healing on those Instagram posts. So it can also impact the value of your case, too. So it is something to look at. Just real quickly, because I know we're close. Those that are coaches, that we've had some prominent stuff happen. If they're coaches on the coaching field, through a public school, are they also covered at all under any of these rules?
They are. They have immunity also. They're they're part of the school system.
All right. So that's just something to evaluate. You've done a great job today. I'm so glad you came on, Greg.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Art.
I'm glad I answered the question right, too.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us as we talked about abuse in schools. Always great topics here on Hollis, Wright. So make sure you join us next week, same time, same place, as we get into yet another topic for you. See you next week.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis, Wright.